Hi, I'm Alistair, and in this video we'll be creating a workflow which calls MCP tools directly. This gives greater control for when you don't want an LLM to decide what tools to call, unlike in the previous tutorial. So we're going to start off by starting a new workflow. We're going to name this tutorial 4, and we're going to set up the MCP server configuration so we can access some MCP tools. If we launch the editor here, we can then add the Deep Wiki server again. Now if you click Add Custom MCP Server, you can add it here. One thing to mention is that this Add Deductive Document MCP Server button adds the MCP server for our complex data analysis, but again, this isn't covered in these tutorials. Now we're just going to add a start and an end event, and then connect these two up. We'll then add a service task in the middle of the two. So go here, choose a spanner and service task, and we're going to name this MCP Tool. Under Deductive Service Properties, we're going to choose the operator ID as MCP/MCP Tool, and the response variable as MCP Tool Result. Now if we open the editor here, we can see the MCP Tool Configuration editor. On the left we've got the tool names, so you can select whichever tools are available from the MCP servers you've configured. And on the right are the tool arguments. We're just going to choose the MCP tool Read Wiki Contents by Deep Wiki. This requires a tool argument of a repo name. So we're going to enter scipy/scipy, a public GitHub repository. Now we'll save the workflow and run it. Now that the workflow is finished running, we can inspect the final event here and see that MCP tool result contains the result of the MCP tool call. This was executed here, read wiki contents, and received the response here. And like in the previous tutorial, I mentioned you can open the event and check the contents. However, because we just want the contents easily accessible, we can just look in the MCP tool result, which we set in the response variable of the service task. Now we're going to move the MCP tool over to the left to give space for a task on the right. We're going to change this to a script task and name it counter script. If we then open the script, we'll enter this code. This just sets the variable with the name response to this string, which just adds the length of the MCP tool result string in the middle of these two strings. If we save this, save the workflow, and then run it, once it's finished running, we can go into this final event and check the task data. And we can see that the MCP tool result is there, like it was last time, but now we have this response variable, and it contains that there's over 1 million characters in the SciPy documentation. Now this is all working, but hard-coding the repository name isn't very useful, so let's add a user input. Let's start off by changing the process name to tutorial 4.1. Now we'll add a user task before all the other tasks with the name user form. So we'll move this start task, add a task in between here which automatically connects, and change it to a user task. And we'll name this user form. If we now go into the web form editor here, add an element, expand this, set the object name to be repository, and the display name to be repository. We'll now save this. Now that the user form is set up, we'll want to actually use the data inputted by the user. So we'll go into the MCP tool, open the editor, and we'll change this repo name. Here we're going to enter this. What this does is it substitutes the value from the task data into these curly braces. In text and JSON inputs such as this, we use double curly braces before and after an input to denote that it's something to be substituted from the task data. In scripts, you can just use variables directly, like you would in regular scripting. For example, let's save here and go to the counter script task. Now we'll change this code to be like this. This just gets the value of the repository name and puts it into this string. If we now save this code, save the workflow, and run it, we come to the query, and for this we'll enter scipy/scipy cookbook, just to be slightly different to the previous example. Once this is finished, we can check the final event. The task data shows that the MCP tool result came through like normal. The form data prior to this is a repository of SciPy cookbook, which we entered, and the response contains the length of the documentation and the name of the repository. That's all for tutorial 4. In this tutorial, I showed you how to create an MCP tool service task and how to get information into that tool from the user form. In the next tutorial, I'll cover how to implement subprocesses within a single BPMN diagram.